Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your host for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Allison Gilbert. Allison Gilbert is an Emmy award-winning journalist and a thought-provoking and influential writer on grief and resilience. The author of numerous books, including the groundbreaking Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive. Her stirring work exposes the secret and essential factor for harnessing loss to drive happiness and rebound from adversity. She serves on the board of directors for the National Alliance for Grieving Children and the advisory board for the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, the preeminent national organization providing grief support to families of America's fallen heroes. Allison is a popular workshop leader and keynote speaker, helping individuals transform personal and professional setbacks into opportunity. She also partners with hospitals, hospices, funeral homes, and religious institutions to bring her one-of-a-kind Memory Bash events to communities across the country. She has run these fun and meaningful events for many groups, including New Song Center for Grieving Children in Phoenix, Hospice of the South Shore in Boston, and North Shore University Hospital and Hospice in Chicago, just to name a few. Allison, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thanks, Fran. I got to shorten that bio. That's a little long.
Allison, before we go into your extraordinary writing, may I first ask you, was there a personal experience with a death loss that inspired you to write about grief and resilience? And if so, will you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that. I think that a lot of us get into this work because it's personal, and I'm no exception to that. Both of my parents died relatively young. It felt very young to me. I was right out of college when my mother passed away from ovarian cancer. And then just a few years after that, my father, right after 9/11, he passed away that Friday. Tuesday was 9/11, and Friday he passed away from cancer as well, unrelated to the terrorist attacks. So within 5 years, I became, rudderless without my parents. And then in the years after that, their siblings passed away, their parents passed away. And so it feels like I was born into the work, given my life circumstances, but then it became this incredible privilege to use my professional background, which is researching and reporting and writing, to try to make heads or tails out of what this experience means, not just to me, but to so many readers who I now connect with.
Yeah. And so tell us about your book. The first one, I think, was Past and Present.
Yeah, well, that's my latest book. I've written 4. No, it's okay. And I'm writing my 5th now. So that's, a fun process. I'm under contract. So that's, I'm working on that one. But Past and Present is really my baby. I just, it's been my favorite project because it is so different from my other works. It is so uplifting. It is so empowering. It's full of practical advice about how to remember our loved ones, not just the theory. And theory is really important too, because there's real reason why staying connected to our loved ones is so important for healing after loss. It actually helps us move forward if we stay connected to those who have died, who still mean something to us. But to me, the opportunity was there to talk about the how. How can we stay connected to our loved ones? What can we do in addition to going to a cemetery, to lighting a candle? How can we practically, creatively, and just wonderfully keep the memory of our loved ones alive. And not just for us, but maybe we have siblings who could use some support. Maybe we have a surviving parent who could use the help. And so I try to take a bird's eye view of all the different ways that we could stay connected, trying to use all of our senses really in ways that are cheap, inexpensive, free in many cases, and just a way to keep those loved ones with us.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially when you think about the old cliche of time, with time you'll forget or move on or, clear out the closet, don't think of them. What you're doing is really bringing to light the myth of that notion and really keeping your loved one close and how to do it. That's amazing. I love it. So give me one or two examples from the book.
I was going to say, no one needs permission from me to keep things, right? Like, I think that if you feel pushed to get rid of objects, heirlooms, tchotchkes, what other people might consider, just taking up space or gathering dust, you'll never get it back. And so to me, there's a middle ground, which is keeping what really makes you happy, to borrow that phrase, what sparks joy from Marie Kondo, what sparks joy, what brings you wholeness. And then if you're not ready to give other things away, there's no pressure. You can pack it up in a box, put it away, and then revisit it even a year later or 2 years later or 5 years later. I feel like there's a one-way road, right? Once you try to get rid of an object and then whether it's giving it away or donating it, there's really no second chance. And so I feel like, again, no one needs permission from me, but the way I've approached it in my life is you know what? It's okay. Take a beat. Take a breath. Use what you love, display what you have that brings you joy, pack up the rest, and over time, maybe revisit it and just give yourself permission to take it slow.
Well, that's that word permission, I think is a big one, people giving themselves permission. There's so many mixed messages that people get. And I can tell you, even to this day, I have a support group that I do once a month for older widowers. And one of the things that comes up all the time is the pressure that family puts on, you have to wrap everything up. You've got to move to the next thing. You need to put this behind you. There's all this language that actually doesn't align with current research on how we grieve and how we work through our grief. It's more that older school of thought of you have to cut the strings in order to to move on, right? Rather than you continue these connections that you have with people who mean something to you, even though they're not physically present here.
Taking it with you.
I would just add, sometimes I think you're right on, Andy and Fran, and I think that, sometimes there are very practical reasons for there to be pressure, right? You have to sell the childhood home. There's pressure not to maybe carry the rent or carry a second mortgage. There's sometimes some really practical reasons why that process may seem to really be kind of pushed towards you like a tailwind. And so in my book, Past and Present, what I talk about is what to do in that circumstance in addition to non-pressure scenarios. So just one example I can give you if you don't mind.
Please.
So for example, here are a bunch of things that you can do if there is that pressure externally to get a childhood home packed up, right? Sometimes that's the reality. You can save a box and keep some items to give away to friends and family who are not involved in the packing up of that house, right?
Yeah.
So often we take for granted that we get to keep things that are close to our moms or our dads. We get to keep it, but there are so many other people who were a part of our parents' lives who may really want that touchstone to their friend, to their colleague, meaning our parent. And so for me, I think there's a rich opportunity to save items to give away to a colleague of your parents, a friend of your parents, maybe even a nurse or a doctor who cared for an ill parent. I think that's an unusual way of thinking about that opportunity.
Yeah.
I'll also add, before I, stop rambling on, I also think there's a wonderful opportunity to donate items that may be of historic importance to their high school or their college, or maybe the little town historical society, or maybe they were involved with the military, and maybe there's a clubhouse who would really appreciate that object or heirloom that you don't need, that doesn't bring you comfort, but would really be meaningful as an historical object of all that your parent did and provided and offered while they were living. And so I think if we recontextualize what we can do under that pressure, we can actually make it meaningful, keep the items that mean something to us, but think about ways to meaningfully part with other objects and heirlooms.
Really spreading the legacy of our person.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And what may not be meaningful to you may be meaningful to somebody else. And there's another upside, by the way, Fran, I will share, and Andy, is that every time you give an object away with purpose, what does that do? It cracks open a moment where you can talk about your loved one, where you can share a story, and even more importantly, be on the receiving end of a story. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know all the stories. And so by taking that moment to give an object away purposefully, you're inviting dialogue. And, that's a gift.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. We're actually, we're going to be sure to add this book as a resource for our young adults, because I think it's very, very relevant and powerful in the healing process. That's amazing.
Well, I was the young adult that you're talking to. I mean, I come to this conversation being a survivor of that, of being a champion of that experience, of helping others manage it, because it was daunting. And I felt like a deer with, in the headlights. And in some ways, and for some period of time, it was paralyzing. And I did keep a lot of my mother's things, and I did keep a lot of my father's things. And none of this is immediate. None of this has to be done tomorrow, which is where, Andy, when you're talking about that pressure, some of it is real, and some of it is you need to accommodate for some amount of pressure, especially if there's financial pressure, like we were talking about before. But there's other pressure that you can kind of just, not now. I'm going to put it in a box and I'm going to deal with it later, because there is no return, that you can't get it back. You can't get that object back. And so I think if we can take the temperature down in a way that feels supportive of where we are at a given time. Anyway, I speak from the heart, because this is me. This was my experience. And so I get it.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing that. But I do want to ask you, talk more about memory bash.
Yes. Oh, that's one of my favorite ideas.
I was going to ask the very same thing.
Yeah. So it's one of my favorite ideas. So a memory bash is like a memory party. So bash party, same thing. And basically, when you get together for like a book club or what have you, like the excuse is that you've read a book, but maybe you really haven't. But like the excuse is having read a book. But the real reason you're getting together is just to kind of be social and have a good time and be with your friends and maybe eat and drink and just hang out. This is the same thing as a memory bash, except flip the book for memories of your loved ones. So the excuse is to get together with your friends and family or whomever you want to invite. But the goal, the intended purpose, is to celebrate each of your loved ones. So everyone comes with the mindset, you're already in the position of wanting to celebrate your loved one's memory. And I have a ton of activities that I suggest if someone wants to do a memory bash on their own. And they could certainly email me for this free, I have a guide that they can do it themselves. Or I do these memory bashes around the country for different hospitals and hospices where they can invite members of their communities who they serve in a celebratory way to keep the memory of loved ones alive. So imagine a party. It's kind of like a social event There could be balloons, and it's fun, but the goal is to set up opportunities around the space that could help facilitate conversations about loved ones, but more importantly, actual fun activities to do. And I can give you examples if we have time, for sure.
I love it, and I'm actually going to take those examples because we're going to do Zoom memory bashes.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I know it is so much fun, and people can do it from, like you said, in a Zoom environment. We can do it in our living rooms just with our immediate families until, this COVID epidemic, passes. And of course, the in-person opportunities. I've done memory bashes for small communities of maybe 5-10 people up to like 250 individuals, I think was the biggest, and it was just oh my gosh, so much fun.
An opportunity to open up the conversation and remember and honor.
Yeah.
And have fun doing it. Yeah, I feel like rightfully so, there is a time and a place where grief and loss, you can't avoid the pain and the sadness. And there is that moment where you have to honor that experience. Yeah. But then there's a chance to pivot. And the pivot doesn't mean or. It doesn't mean you can either be sad or happy. The pivot is really accepting the word and, A-N-D. You can honor the past and celebrate in the present. You can remember the past and move forward with the memories of your loved one. And that's really what a memory bash is, this memory party. It's like having fun with your current friends, your current family, and it's a celebration of the loved ones who you've never forgotten. And you want to provide that same opportunity for your friends and your family to come together to remember those who they miss. And I think it's like this perfect marriage of poignancy and celebration. And I love the idea of you wanting to do memory bashes on Zoom. That fills my heart.
Yeah,
I think it'd be any opportunity we can create here with AMF to get people connected with each other around their grief, around memories, any of those things we've seen it work, and we've seen it heal people. And so we're actually about out of time, which is these conversations fly by. I say this every time.
Hey, it's not so.
I believe it's the case, but a lot of our listeners do want to know how they can connect with our guests. So if someone wants to know how they can connect with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I love connecting. And so I just would invite anyone to go to my website, which is AllisonGilbert.com. I'm everywhere. So on Twitter, it's A Gilbert Writer, because I'm a writer. And on Facebook, you can find me there too. I have an author page there. I think it's Allison Gilbert with the author, and it has the blue check mark, so you know it's me. And of course on Instagram too, it's A Gilbert Writer. So my greatest joy is connecting with folks, because I actually learn a lot too. It's not just me who gives, it's I receive. And so I would love to connect with whomever would like to reach out and share your story with me. And if I could be of service, I would love to hear how.
Beautiful and genuine. Allison, thank you so much for being a guest here on Let's Talk Death and for sharing your personal story and the inspiration in your book and Memory Bash. We love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fran, Andy. You guys are awesome, and what you're doing here is a true gift, and thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you, Allison, and thank you for those joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support of grieving young adults. It's a program we call Actively Moving Forward.
Make sure to sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links to future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Let's Talk Death.